This is the Louie T Network. Hey, either you're outside or you're
in the lab room.
Who else could it be but me, your me, Louie T? Welcome, you are in the lab room. Of course, I am your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Free agency! Who doesn't love free? Okay, nothing is free in free agency, but the admission is free, right? Come on in, have a seat, sit down. Let's talk free agency. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about free agency. It's getting hot, man. Free agency is heating up, and it hasn't even started yet. You gotta love it. This new tampering period that they give you right before free agency is the best because you get to figure out what's going to happen before it actually happens. So let's jump in. I've got 4 different categories. You got done deals that, hey, self-explanatory. Deals basically done, just got to put ink to paper. You've got trades that have happened over the last week. We'll talk about those. Interest and dangling. This is a category that is simply about players that are garnering interest from various teams and they're dangling out there who's going to get that player. And then news and rumors will be the last thing we finish up with. Let's go to these done deals. We're going to get through this as quick as possible. Let's go. Ndamukong Suh, that's the biggest fish out there in the NFL pond. And you knew he was going to break the bank. He already said my agent is picking. So translation, going where the money is the greatest. That happened to be Miami. 6 years, $114 million deal. Of course, he won't see all of that money. The big number here, $60 million guaranteed, highest paid defensive player in the entire National Football League. His deal, $19 million per, $3 million more than the deal that J.J. Watt got a year ago at 16 per that made him the highest paid defensive player in the year. Dolphins forking over a lot of cash. Lions were interested. They went as high as $57 million guaranteed. Wasn't enough. When it's all said and done, no state tax in Miami. You add up all those dollars, can't turn it down. Ndamukong Suh will be a Miami Dolphin. Marshawn Lynch, beast mode, is back in the Pacific Northwest. Signs a 2-year, $24 million deal. $12 million of that guaranteed. Right now, to me, every deal that he signs is a 1-year contract. So I'm looking for him to cash in on his $12 million this year. We'll see what happens moving forward, but he's going to be back in Seattle, and that team isn't the same without him, so this is a huge signing for the Seattle Seahawks. If they're going to return to the Super Bowl for the 3rd consecutive year, he's going to be a huge part of what they do offensively. Devin McCourty, supposed to be one of the biggest free agent acquisitions out there for a team desperately needing safety help, and the beauty of what teams have done this year is they've kept their own stuff. There's nothing like homegrown product staying at home. Devin McCourty said, look, I put a number out there. I asked the Patriots to hit all of the benchmarks. They did. I'm staying in New England where I want to be. 5 years, $47.5 million. 28.5 of that is guaranteed cash for Devin McCourty, one of the best free safeties in all of the National Football League. Patriots needed to have him back. They got him back. Now all they need is Darrelle Revis to make that cipher complete. You go to Randall Cobb. Randall Corn on the Cobb. And he was looking to cash in. And he told the Packers from the jump, I just want $9 to $10 million per year. If we can get that number, I'll be back in Green Bay. I don't want to go anywhere else. I'm playing with the best quarterback in the league. How could it get any better for me? Just pay me my money. Sounds simple enough. Packers made it interesting though. They waited to the last minute. The Raiders were talking crazy. A number of other teams, Kansas City, talking crazy. At the end of the day, Packers said, that's our stuff. He's not going anywhere. They signed Randall Cobb to a 4-year, $40 million deal. $17 million of it guaranteed. He'll be back playing with Aaron Rodgers and Air Jordan for the next 4 seasons. Byron Maxwell, big free agent fish And we knew he was going to command a lot of interest on the free agent market. Now, the thing about Byron Maxwell is he a top flight corner? You don't know the answer to that, neither do I. I will tell you this much, playing across from Richard Sherman, you get a lot of work, and that man put in a lot of work. I don't know if he's a top flight corner, we're going to all find out together, but because this cornerback market was so, I don't want to call it weak, because there were some good corners, but because there is no true elite corner out on the market, he was the best of the rest. He was going to get paid, and that he has. Philadelphia Eagles picked up the phone, contacted his agent, 6 years, $63 million for a young man that has never been the guy. Well, that kind of money says you're going to be the guy in Philadelphia. $25 million of that guaranteed for Byron Maxwell. Good luck, Philadelphia. You're going to need it. Haven't had the best luck with corners on the free agent market of late. Let's hope this guy is a little bit different. Need I remind you of Nnamdi Asomugha and Kerry Williams? Good luck with Byron Maxwell. Brandon Flowers. This is a guy that I love in San Diego. He wanted to bet on himself last year after he had a tough year in Kansas City, dealt with some injuries, didn't play his best football. Chiefs got rid of him, signed a one-year deal with the Chargers and said, hey, I'm betting that I'll play better this year than I did the year before. He did exactly that. And so he was rewarded in San Diego with a 4-year, $36 million contract. He's going to remain a San Diego Charger, and I think that's important because he's going to help continue to mentor the young fella that they drafted last year out of TCU, Jason Verrett. I think it's a great move by the Chargers to hold on to Brandon Flowers. Kareem Jackson, another free agent corner, probably the second best corner on the market when this was supposed to get underway at the cornerback store. Well, you take off Byron Maxwell and go ahead and scratch off Kareem Jackson as well. He stays home. He has been a Texan his entire career and will remain that as he signed up a 4-year, $34 million deal. $20 million of it is guaranteed for Kareem Jackson, so he'll continue to play with Jonathan Joseph out there in Houston and help that defense continue to be solid. Mark Ingram, 4-year, $16 million deal to remain in New Orleans, continuing the trend of guys staying at home and teams holding on to their stuff. Now, to me, this was a low market value deal. And again, has Mark Ingram been lights out? Has he lived up to that first round draft choice? I don't quite know the answer to that, but I don't think he's been given enough opportunity to do so. Maybe this was a situation where he just wanted to remain in New Orleans and felt comfortable, and they probably said, look, you're finally going to get the opportunity to be the guy. I think there was more money out there for him somewhere else, but at the end of the day, home is home, and it's where his heart is. Maybe New Orleans is exactly that for him. They're a good football team, and he feels like this is where he wants to be. 4 years, $16 million. Solid money, not great money. Thought he could have gotten more if he would have waited. We'll see what happens. He's staying in New Orleans. Frank Gore looks like he's on his way to join the Chip Kelly Express out in Philadelphia. 3 years, $7.5 million guaranteed, and that's in the first 2 seasons for Frank Gore. Don't see him playing longer than 2 seasons in Philadelphia. So essentially this is a 2-year, $7.5 million deal for the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll see how this works out. I'm not a huge fan of swapping out Shady McCoy for Frank Gore, but again, I'm not going to bash Chip Kelly because I want to see what he has up his sleeve. Chip's up to something. I don't know what yet. We're going to find out, and I am very interested to see what Chip Kelly is going to build out in Philadelphia. I just know he took a 29 or 28-year-old back and swapped it out for a north of 30 back. We'll see what happens. That normally doesn't go very well. You go on to another free agent signing, Mark Sanchez. We're talking quarterbacks, and here's a guy that I always make fun of, Dirty Chaz, okay? Dirty Chaz! That's, look, he's an easy guy, easy target, but when you're talking about free agent quarterbacks, there weren't many good names out there. And to me, he was one of the better guys out there if you were looking to get a guy that you could count on as a backup. And if in a pinch you needed him to start, I felt good about Mark Sanchez. So did the Philadelphia Eagles, which is why they retained him on a 2-year, $16 million deal. He can get up to $16 million. And so 5.5 of that guaranteed for Mark Sanchez. Dirty Chaz will remain dirty in Philly. You go to Derek Newton, and the offensive tackle market isn't that great this year in free agency. So if you're a team and you got a tackle and you feel good about him, you better go ahead and lock him up. Lock him up. Because I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of teams out there desperate for tackle help that will come sniffing around your stuff and take it from you. Derek Newton, Houston Texans, they said, look, we groomed this young fella. We remember when Derek Newton wasn't good. His first 2 years, he struggled mightily. They said, we groomed him up and we shined him up and we made him into the player he is. Do you really think we'll put in all of that hard-earned work just to let you take our stuff from us? Not so fast. Leave my stuff right where it is. And that's exactly what the Texans said to everybody else out on the market. 5 years, $26.5 million deal. $10 million of that guaranteed for Derek Newton. He will remain the right tackle of the Houston Texans. Orlando Franklin, he is not staying put. He is moving, not far though, staying in the division. Denver Broncos offensive lineman heading to San Diego. $36.5 million deal for the versatile offensive lineman from the Denver Broncos going to San Diego, so he's staying in the division. You know, it's nothing like going to the store and shopping within the division. Teams love to do it all the time. Who knows the players better than another team in the division that sees him 2 times a year? And so the Chargers will be giving him $7.2 million per $14 million guaranteed for Orlando Franklin. Doug Free. 3 years, $15 million to keep that Dallas Cowboys dominant line intact. $6 million guaranteed. Huge offseason priority for the Cowboys. They take care of business. Now all they got to do is bring the horse back that was behind that big mammoth offensive line, and that's DeMarco Murray. Speaking of which, let's go to the dangling and interested category, and that's where we start with DeMarco Murray. Perfect segue. We'll get back to some more done deals in a second. DeMarco Murray has 2 teams really out there interested in him, and really you can say 3. To me, it's a 3-team race. What is Jacksonville doing? They're spending a lot of money and they have a lot to spend. What is the Indianapolis Colts up to? And of course, the Dallas Cowboys. Those are the 3 teams. It looked after that very minuscule deal taken by Mark Ingram in New Orleans. It looked like he was going to have to come back to Dallas at a very meager number. It didn't look good for him. But then when Shady goes off to Buffalo, rips up the deal, gets a new deal with the Bills, 5 years, $40 million, $16 million guaranteed in the first year, $26.5 guaranteed over the life of the deal. That changed the whole game for DeMarco Murray. Now he feels like, hey, I can get $8 million out on the free agent market. Somebody's going to pay me that type of money. Will it be you, Dallas? Will it be you, Jared? Are you going to open up the pocketbook and give me some or what? We will see. But there are a lot of teams interested in the services of DeMarco Murray. Don't count out the Oakland Raiders. Nobody's got more money to spend than those guys. So we'll see. CJ Spiller, talking about a thriller. CJ Spiller, 7 teams, up to 7 teams are interested in his services, so stay tuned. CJ Spiller said, I'm going to take my precious time, let the market develop, and then I'm gonna find me a new home. I'm not rushing this process at all, so don't expect CJ to come off the board in day 1 or even day 2 for that matter. It will take some time for his market to develop and for him to pick a new team. Ron Parker, a safety that I am somewhat enamored by in Kansas City, has up to 7 suitors as well. He's a young fella that intrigues me greatly because he's a safety that can play corner, has the type of skills that you see from a cornerback, like Devin McCourty, and a guy that can range around the field, make some things happen. He impressed me last year, and it's no wonder that up to 7 teams are starting to beat down his door to see what it's going to take to make him a new member of their football team. Terrence Knighton, good old pot roast, has a number of teams interested in him coming in and helping their defensive line. You've got Oakland, you've got Washington, Indy, and Chicago. Right now, the 2 front runners are the Oakland Raiders and the Chicago Bears. We'll see what Terrence Notting decides. He already said, whatever I decide to do, it will be very fast. So expect him either today or early tomorrow when free agency kicks off to make a decision and sign on the dotted line. Jared Odrick is a guy that he's actually going to sign with Jacksonville. There were a number of teams in the race, including Denver and Oakland. When it's all said and done, no state tax in Florida means Jared Odrick is staying put in the state of Florida, just not going to be a Dolphin anymore. Moving down the street, he's going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Brian Orakpo is a guy coming off of another pec injury, looking to get paid. He's got 3 potential suitors right now. At the time, looks like Philadelphia and Arizona are both interested, as well as the Atlanta Falcons. They were interested in him last year before the Redskins slapped the franchise tag on him. Would not be surprised if the Falcons said, hey, we're finally going to get our man the second time around. Jermaine Gresham looks like he's going to Oakland. Not certain yet. Cleveland's still hanging around, waiting to see what happens, but Jermaine Gresham looks like a guy that's going to end up donning the silver and black. Jordan Cameron, another tight end out there dangling around. He's got 5 teams interested in him. Cleveland, Oakland, Denver, Seattle, and Jacksonville. Remember, Seattle was thinking about trading for him last year. Jacksonville, if they get Julius Thomas, will be out of the Jordan Cameron sweepstakes. And if the Raiders get Jermaine Gresham, they're also out of the Jordan Cameron sweepstakes. So we'll see what happens here. Seems like it's going to come down to Cleveland, Seattle, and Denver. We'll see what happens with Jordan Cameron. JC Money. And so, move on to Mike Iupati. Here's a guy from San Francisco, wants to stay in San Francisco, and with the news of guys retiring, maybe some money is freed up for a guy like Mike Iupati to return. It looks like Oakland, New York Jets, Buffalo, and Minnesota are all teams considering bringing him in. And don't count out Jacksonville. Jacksonville is always sniffing around any player of any merit. So that's a very interesting situation to keep an eye on, because Mike Iupati will probably command some of the most money along the offensive line of any free agent in this year's class. Brian Bulaga, another guy that is looking to make a big payday. He's talking about looking to get $7 to $8 million on the open market. Ex-Green Bay Packers offensive tackle. Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, Washington, and Buffalo all interested in him. But again, some of those teams will be priced out of his market. Jacksonville, they got that green, and that stuff talks this time of the year. So now let's go back to some more signings and done deals. You look at Ryan Mallett. Here's a guy traded for by the Texans from New England a year ago to see if he could come in and possibly start in Houston. Well, he's a free agent now. He's back in Houston to compete for the starting job as the Texans quarterback. 2 years, $7 million for Ryan Mallett. Ted Ginn Jr., 2-year contract to go back to Carolina. He should have never left. A lot of times guys find out very quickly grass isn't always greener on the other side. Ted Ginn Jr. found that out. He's going back to Carolina. You look at Jeremy Maclin. This was a guy that a lot of teams were looking to make a big time offer towards, and I thought Raiders were going to have a shot. You thought that Jacksonville would be in the mix. You also looked at a team like Philadelphia, where he was coming from, and I still couldn't understand why the Eagles weren't trying to bring him back until I saw the deal he got, and then I understood it all made sense then. Chiefs are about to fork over $11 million per year to Jeremy Maclin. Nothing is final yet. But right now, that sounds like a lot of money for a guy that, hey, he's a good receiver, but his first 1,000-yard season of his career last year, not short of $11 million for that kind of player per year. I don't know. But again, when you're the Chiefs and you don't have any receiving touchdowns, you're desperate, and desperate times call for desperate measures. You move on to Jerry Hughes, and I'm happy for Jerry Hughes. Here's a guy, first-round pick, Indianapolis Colts, did not work out. So the Colts traded him to Buffalo. Teams exchange first-round disappointments, and Jerry Hughes goes and resurrects his career in Buffalo. 20 sacks over the last 2 seasons, and so it's good to see a guy be rewarded for resurrecting his career, and it's even better to see him stay with the team that gave him an opportunity to resuscitate his career. 5 years, $45 million for Jerry Hughes, a guy that can get to the quarterback. $22 million of that is guaranteed money. The Raiders finally get on the board. I'm going to talk about the Raiders a little bit later on. The Raiders finally get on the board. All this money they had to spend, all these guys that they were chasing after, haven't been able to get many of them. They finally find a guy that they can basically agree to principle in Rodney Hudson, center from Kansas City. And again, I talked about teams shopping within the division. Happens all the time. Teams love to shop at the divisional store. Raiders do the same thing. They lose Steve Wisniewski in free agency. He's not coming back. Already said he's not going to be back. So they had to replenish the center position. They bring in Rodney Hudson, and they look to make him the highest paid center in the league. 5 years, $44.5 million. So you're basically talking $9 million per. That's a lot of money for an interior lineman, but Rodney Hudson is a really good football player. You look at the Chicago Bears, they get on the board by signing Pernell McPhee to a 5-year, $40 million deal, wrestling him away from the Baltimore Ravens. They need to stop the run. They're switching to a 3-4 defense. Vic Fangio, their new defensive coordinator, they need a 5 technique like Pernell McPhee to come in and help them solidify that defensive line. He's going to do exactly that. $16 million of that deal is guaranteed. Billy Ho is signing up with the Houston Texans. Brian Hoyer is going to be a Texan, and he's going to compete with Ryan Mallett to see who will start at quarterback in Houston for the Texans. Am I a huge fan of this move? No, because I think I know what Billy Ho is as a quarterback, but hey, more power to the Texans for going out and getting Ryan Fitzpatrick Jr. Let's see if it works out for them the second time around. Jared Odrick, I talked about him earlier about teams being interested. He's going to sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars with a deal that will pay him $7 million per. The terms of the deal have really not been disclosed yet, but $7 million per, you're probably talking about a 4 or a 5-year deal, anywhere from $28 to $35 million for Jared Odrick. You look at Jeremy Parnell, another big offensive lineman along that Dallas Cowboys tree that they have. This is a backup offensive lineman, but their line is so good that teams are picking off backup linemen to come out and start, and that's what the Jaguars have done, signing him to a $32 million deal to come in and be their right tackle. So Jeremy Parnell cashing in on the success of that Cowboys line, and now he's going to be a starter in Jacksonville. Let's talk about trades that have happened. We all know about the biggest one, the Shady McCoy trade that has been facilitated and will be finalized. He signed a new deal. I talked about that deal. 5 years, $40 million, $16 million in the first year, $26.5 million guaranteed over the life of this contract. So Shady McCoy definitely going to be happier now that he's going to Buffalo with a new contract in exchange for Kiko Alonso, who will go and be a cheap option at the linebacker position for Chip Kelly. Eagles free up over $10 million worth of salary cap by making this move. So looks like it's going to be a win-win for both teams. You still know how I feel about this deal, but hey, look, you gotta do what you gotta do, and if Chip Kelly feels like this is what he needs to do, then by all means, so be it. Jets trade for Brandon Marshall. B. Marsh is now a New York Jet. The Bears trade him for a 5th round pick, and so we'll see what happens with Brandon Marshall. Who will be getting him the football? Will Geno Smith come around? Will they have to go and find a quarterback elsewhere? We'll see what the Jets do with that position, but Brandon Marshall definitely helps them. Now you got 2 big receivers on the outside, in Marshall on one side and Decker on the other, and I like Jeremy Curley a lot in the slot. Let's see what the Jets are able to do offensively with that much talent around the quarterback position. You look at another trade. Matt Castle traded from Minnesota to Buffalo. They tear his deal up, or they're going to tear his deal up and look to give him a new deal in Buffalo. and looks like he's going to be the man in Buffalo. And we'll see what happens. I talked about this when I talked about the trade and how I felt like now they just needed to go out and find a guy that could run the show, steady the ship, allow that defense to do what it is it does, allow Shady to come in and do what it is he does. Fred Jackson is going to be back in Buffalo, so you've got a nice little rushing attack. You still got Boobie Dixon as well, so there's a lot of guys there in Buffalo that can help this team. Now you bring in Matt Castle. I think that's a really solid move. Am I in love with it? No, but again, this Bills team just needs someone to steady the ship, and I think Matt Castle could be exactly that type of player for them. So we go from the trades now to news and rumors. Adrian Peterson says, if I'm going to be traded, I want to go to Arizona. So that right now is something that is in the works. We'll see what happens. That's a story worth following because, again, you never know what's going to happen with that Adrian Peterson saga. He could end up in Minnesota, highly unlikely, probably going to be traded, and he wants to go to a team where he feels like he can win, and that place is Arizona for him. Houston, we have a problem. No, not Houston Texans. I'm talking about Justin Houston, not happy with his situation in Kansas City. He's upset at the fact that they franchise tagged him after he came in last year on good faith, thinking that he was going to get a long-term deal. They have not been able to strike one. Now he is so upset that he's out there because he's been tagged. He's out there looking for a deal to sign an offer sheet with another team that the Chiefs cannot match. He's hoping to find someone before the draft, but he says if he can't find someone before the draft, maybe after some teams miss out on some of these pass rushing specialists, they'll have to do something and maybe he can find a deal thereafter. We'll see. That's definitely a story worth keeping a close eye on because he is one of the preeminent pass rushers in this league. If he's not happy, he's going to make someone else potentially happy down the road. Jets to cut Percival Harvin after the Brandon Marshall trade. There's no room for him on this roster, and he's due to make way too much money. So Percival Harvin probably going to be packing his bags and hitting the streets soon. Who's he going to go to? Chargers already have enlisted a little bit of interest, so have the Patriots and the Oakland Raiders, so that is a situation worth monitoring. Darrelle Revis, $20 million option for the Patriots to pick up. They might just do it. Right now, things are a little tentative. You don't know what's going to happen. They got the first domino to drop to the Patriots by re-signing their all-world free safety in Devin McCourty. So that helps them out tremendously. Now they got to try to figure out a way to get Darrelle Revis back on their football team. Jets and the Chiefs are still waiting to see what happens. If they can't do it, one of those teams will be happy to bring him on board. Torrey Smith to San Francisco, quote unquote, by a source, done deal. We'll see what happens there. He's already written a letter to the Baltimore Sun, basically saying goodbye to Baltimore, but saying, I'm still going to be a fixture in the community. Remember, he went to college at the University of Maryland. He lives in the Baltimore, Maryland area, so he says, I'll be back every offseason. This is my home. I'll never leave. I'm going to continue to be in the community. So he basically said goodbye without saying goodbye. He's not going to be back in Baltimore, and it looks like San Francisco is where he's going to end up. Andre Johnson says, I don't want you to trade me. I want to be released. I want to pick my next destination where I'm going to finish up my career. I want to play with a great quarterback. I want a chance at a ring. I don't want to be traded. So the Texans counter by saying, if you can't find a trade, then we'll cut you. So Andre Johnson said, well, I'm not finding a trade. Texans said, okay, we're going to have to cut you. So look for Andre Johnson to be hitting the streets in a minute now, and he should be finding work very shortly. Don't be surprised if he ends up somewhere like Indy or he ends up somewhere like the Giants. You never know where he's going to go. He's looking to play with a team that's a contender and a team that has a great quarterback. As long as he doesn't end up in New England, we're all going to be just fine. You move on to, and also Philadelphia is another place he mentioned, but the Eagles don't have that quarterback that he's looking for, so we'll see what happens with that. Debo, who? Debo, I'm gonna just go ahead and tuck mine in, has been released from the Kansas City Chiefs. Have cut him loose, and I like Debo, I really do, but 0 touchdowns, too much money, not enough production. He's going to be a guy that some teams mull over in free agency. He'll land on his feet somewhere, but he's no longer a Kansas City Chief. Julius Thomas, close to a deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is an interesting case though because they have to wait until the Tuesday 4 o'clock deadline where free agency then begins and then you can sign a deal. There's still a grace period where another team can swoop in and have something happen. Teams around the league are worried that the Seattle Seahawks might swoop in and get this guy. They don't need any more targets for a team that's already good offensively, have a lot of no-name guys that are getting the job done. You throw in a Julius Thomas and you allow Juice to be the tight end and catching the football out there. That'll open up the floodgates for those receivers to make some things happen. Teams around the league don't want to see that happen, but it just very well might. We'll see what happens. See if the Jacksonville Jaguars can hold them off at bay. Again, no state tax in Florida, and they're probably going to be able to offer him more guaranteed money. I think he'll be in Jacksonville when it's all said and done, but wouldn't be surprised if Seattle makes a last-ditch effort to get him in the Pacific Northwest. Bears have a franchise-altering decision to make on whether to retain the services of Jay Cutler or not. This could shake up the quarterback landscape in the National Football League because if Jay Cutler hits the street, you know a lot of teams are going to be very interested in making him their starter. Now, here's the situation. If Jay Cutler is on the roster at the end of the start of the new league year, so if he's on the roster past Tuesday, the Bears would then not only be locking themselves in for the 2015 season, they would also be locking themselves in to the 2016 season with Jay Cutler, and that would total $25.5 million. So if they cut him, they'll save themselves not only this year's salary, but next year's salary as well, and that would free up a lot of cap space. Now, if you cut him, what do you have as an option at quarterback? Jimmy Clausen? Really? So that's a big question. Now, we've seen that new regime has not claimed Jay Cutler as their starter. They have not made any promises to anybody. They have been very non-committal to Jay Cutler since coming on board, and John Fox has made it known that, hey, we're exploring all options, so anything's possible. I can't wait to see if Jay Cutler is still a member of the Chicago Bears after March the 10th. We shall see. That is a developing story right there. So, Chris Johnson, non-football related story, shot in Florida, in Orlando over the weekend, sustained an injury to his shoulder when he was shot. Now, 3 people in the car, all of them shot. One passed away. Chris Johnson was shot in the shoulder, and the other passenger in the car was shot 3 times. Once in the arm, once in the hand, once in the leg. It's a drive-by shooting at a light. Let this just be a lesson to anyone out there. At 4 o'clock in the morning, nothing good happens. You're either doing one of 2 things. You're getting something to eat or you're going to the hospital. Let's not do that, folks. 4 o'clock in the morning, nothing's good happening. Go home. Chris Johnson was released from the hospital today. Hopefully he'll be fine and be able to move forward from that tragic incident where someone lost their life. And finally, biggest news of the day, Patrick Willis, all-world inside linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers after 8 years of service in the National Football League, has decided to hang his cleats up. He's going to retire. Bombshell, because it seemed like this guy still had a lot left in the tank. He says he wants to do more charitable work with kids, and he says his body feels great, but that toe injury that he sustained last year says otherwise, and so he's going to hang it up. And on the heels of that, Justin Smith, who was kind of hanging on just to see if he could get back to the Super Bowl one last time, also said, hey, he's throwing his cleats in, we'll go ahead and toss mine in as well. So he's hanging them up. So this 49ers team going to look vastly different in the upcoming 2015-2016 season. And remember, no Jim Harbaugh as the head coach, so that team is going to look totally different than the one we have seen over the last 3 or 4 seasons. And so, one last signing, Sean Witherspoon is now in the Arizona Cardinals, so he inks a 1-year deal with the Cardinals. So free agency is hot, hot, and we haven't even started yet. You gotta love it. You gotta love the National Football League. And so that's going to do it for me, Louie T. I thank you for joining me. That's your free agency update. You know we're going to run down all of the transactions as they happen. And so I'll come back tomorrow. We'll talk about all the things. Most of what has happened today will happen tomorrow. Guys will actually go sit down and actually sign the documents, put their name on the dotted line. And so a lot of these transactions we've already covered here today. But if anything new happens, any new developments, we'll break it down here in the lab room. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. Come back and join me as I break down anything and everything in the National Football League. See you tomorrow. There's plenty more where that came from. While you're here, subscribe to the channel. If you want more Louie T, be sure to follow me on Twitter @InTheLabRoom, or you can like the Facebook page @InTheLabRoom. That's In the Lab Room on Facebook and @InTheLabRoom on Twitter. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so.